The rain had already been falling over Chicago for 3 straight hours that evening. Water streamed down the shop windows, blurred the glow of neon signs, and turned the sidewalks into long, dark mirrors. People hurried home beneath umbrellas, trying to spend as little time outside as possible. Emily Carter sat on a freezing bench in front of a shopping center that had already closed for the night. She tried to warm her numb fingers with her breath. She wore an old jacket that a former roommate from her college dorm had given her the previous winter. The zipper had been broken for months, so Emily had to hold the sides of the jacket together with one hand. For the past 2 days, she had barely eaten anything. That morning, she had bought a small bread roll and a cup of tea with nearly all the money she had left. After that, only $37 remained in her pocket. There had been a time when her life looked completely different. 3 years earlier, Emily had been a second-year student in the College of Education at a university in Chicago. She rented a modest room, earned extra money tutoring students, and dreamed of becoming a literature teacher one day. Back then, she believed she had her whole life ahead of her. Then her grandmother became seriously ill. She was the only family Emily had left after the death of her parents, the only person who had always supported her. Emily took academic leave from the university so she could care for her. 6 months later, her grandmother passed away. After the funeral came another devastating blow. Emily discovered that the family apartment had been mortgaged for years and that the accumulated debts were worth far more than the property itself. She always suspected that her grandmother had been manipulated by people involved in fraudulent real estate schemes, but Emily was never able to prove it. A few months later, she was homeless. Returning to university was no longer an option. First, she worked as a waitress. Then she found a job as a sales assistant. Later, she became a delivery driver. No matter how hard she worked, every job seemed to end the same way: staff cuts, a business closing down, another lost position, another move, and another interview where she was always told the same thing. "We'll call you." The call never came. The past 6 months had been the hardest of all. Emily lost her job at a small electronics store. Shortly afterward, the woman who rented her a room became ill and decided to let several relatives move in with her. Emily had to leave. She tried returning to her old college dormitory, but the building had been closed for a complete renovation. From then on, she survived on temporary jobs and slept in cheap hostels whenever she could afford them. That morning, she had run out of money for that too. Everything she owned fit inside one large sports bag. She had left it in a storage locker at Union Station and spent the entire day walking through Chicago, hoping to find any kind of work. She had found nothing. Emily rose from the bench and slowly started walking. The rain was getting heavier. Her clothes had already been soaked for at least an hour. She tried not to think about where she would spend the night, but the same worry returned again and again. She would probably have to go back to the station and spend the night in a waiting area. As she reached an intersection near an expensive restaurant on Michigan Avenue, she noticed a group of men. Their laughter and loud voices could be heard even through the sound of the rain. Emily lowered her eyes and tried to walk past without attracting attention. One of them noticed her. "Hey, beautiful. Come over here." Emily quickened her pace. The man stepped directly into her path. The smell of alcohol on him was overwhelming. 2 more men moved closer. Emily felt fear rising inside her. "Please let me pass. Relax. We just want to get to know you." "I don't want to get to know you." The men exchanged glances. One of them gave her an unpleasant smile. "Look at her. So proud. Maybe we should feed her first. She's so skinny she looks like she might disappear." They all laughed. Emily tried to go around them. They blocked her again. Her fear turned into real panic. At that exact moment, a black SUV slammed on its brakes beside the cab. The driver's door opened. A tall man wearing a dark coat stepped out. He did not raise his voice. He made no threatening movements. But there was something about his calm confidence that was far more intimidating than shouting could ever have been. The men immediately fell silent. "Is there a problem?" the stranger asked. "There's no problem." "Then step away from the woman." He spoke calmly. No one argued. Seconds later, the group was already hurrying back toward the restaurant. The stranger watched them leave, then turned toward Emily. For several moments, neither of them spoke. "Where do you live?" The question caught her off guard. "Right now." "Nowhere." The man frowned. "What does that mean?" "Exactly what I said." "Do you have family?" "Not anymore." "Money?" Emily let out a bitter smile. $37. The man looked at her soaked clothes, then at her worn shoes, and finally back at her face. "Get in the car." Emily took a small step backward. "Why?" "Because if you stay out here in this rain, you'll have a fever within a few hours." Emily remained cautious. She had had far too many terrible stories over the past few years to trust a stranger easily. The man seemed to understand exactly what she was thinking. "If I wanted to hurt you, I probably wouldn't be standing here talking to you in the middle of a public street, in front of a crowded restaurant, surrounded by security cameras." Emily had to admit that his reasoning made sense. Still, she was afraid. "My name is Emily." "Nice to meet you." "And you?" "Michael." "Michael Reed." A few minutes later, the SUV was moving through the illuminated streets of Chicago. Emily remained silent for almost the entire drive. Michael did not seem interested in making conversation either. After leaving downtown, they drove toward Lake Forest. The vehicle entered a huge private property protected by tall gates. Several separate buildings stood across the grounds. Michael stopped the SUV in front of a small two-story house. "This is the guest house." Emily looked at him in surprise. "Do you live here?" "No. The main house is farther down." Michael opened the guest house door. "Come inside." It was so warm inside that Emily immediately felt slightly dizzy. Michael walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and placed a bottle of water on the table. Then he took out some bread and food. He moved quickly and a little roughly, as if he wanted to finish an uncomfortable responsibility as soon as possible. Finally, he turned toward her. "Warm up. Eat something. Take a shower. And tomorrow you can leave." Emily blinked. "What did you say?" "You heard me." He placed a key on the table. "The bathroom is upstairs. There are clean clothes in the closet and food in the refrigerator." Emily did not know what to say. For months, even people who knew her had avoided helping her. Now a complete stranger was giving her a roof over her head. Even if it was only for one night. "Thank you." Michael shrugged. "You don't need to thank me." He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. "Lock the door from the inside. It'll be better for everyone." Seconds later, the door closed behind him. Emily was alone. For the first time in a very long time, there was no cold, no rain, and no fear around her. She stood in the middle of the living room for several minutes, almost afraid that the feeling of safety would disappear as suddenly as it had arrived. Outside, rain continued to strike the windows. Inside, the house was silent. The warmth from the heating slowly drove the cold from her body. Emily carefully removed her wet jacket and placed it near a radiator. Then she went upstairs. The bathroom was larger than some of the rooms she had once rented. There were white tiles, a huge mirror, and soft towels. For several moments, she simply looked around. Then she turned on the hot water. When it touched her frozen hands, tears unexpectedly filled her eyes. For months, she had fought not to complain. Not to cry. Not to think too much about the future. That night, all the tension she had been carrying finally broke through. Half an hour later, she went downstairs. She had found clean clothes in the closet. The sweatpants were slightly too large, and the t-shirt almost reached her knees, but compared with her soaked clothing, they felt luxurious. In the kitchen, she opened the refrigerator. There was cheese, eggs, vegetables, yogurt, and several containers of prepared food. Emily took only one sandwich and a glass of water. She felt uncomfortable taking too much advantage of someone else's kindness. After eating, she settled onto the couch beneath a blanket. The warmth slowly relaxed her muscles. For the first time in a long while, she did not have to wonder where she would sleep or how she would survive until morning. Still, she could not fall asleep. Too much had happened in a single day. Her thoughts kept returning to Michael. He seemed like a strange man. On one hand, he had helped a complete stranger without asking for anything in return. On the other, he spoke to her as though he wanted her out of his life as quickly as possible. She remembered his tired, closed-off face. Almost emotionless. A man with eyes like that had probably faced serious problems of his own. Without realizing it, Emily eventually drifted to sleep. A faint sound woke her. At first, she thought it was coming from outside. Then she heard it again. It sounded like a tiny whimper. Emily sat up. The sound came again. She stood and looked around the room. This time she realized it was coming from very close by. Another soft cry. From underneath an armchair. Emily knelt down and looked beneath it. At first, she saw nothing. Then she noticed a cardboard box. The lid was slightly open. The sound was coming from inside. Emily carefully pulled the box out. Her heart suddenly began beating faster. For some reason, she felt deeply uneasy. She lifted the lid. Something moved inside. A second later, a tiny hand appeared. Emily froze. Her mind refused to understand what she was seeing. Then she heard a soft cry. There was a baby inside the box. A very small girl, probably no older than 2 months. She was wrapped in a thin blanket and staring at Emily with enormous dark eyes. "Oh my God. Where did you come from?" Emily carefully lifted the baby and held her against her chest. The little girl stopped crying almost immediately, as though she recognized the warmth of another person. There was a note inside the box. Emily's hands trembled as she opened it. There were only a few lines. "Michael, forgive me. I can't do this anymore. She is your daughter. Her name is Eva. Please take care of her." Emily read the note several times. She could not believe it. Had someone really abandoned a baby here? She looked at the clock. It was 1:30 in the morning. For several seconds, she tried to decide what to do. The answer was obvious. She had to tell Michael immediately. Emily wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and went outside with the baby in her arms. The main house was about 100 yards away. Several windows on the second floor were still lit. Michael was probably still awake. Emily quickly reached the porch and rang the bell. Less than a minute later, the door opened. Michael looked both irritated and half asleep. "What happened?" "I found this under an armchair." He frowned. "Found what?" Emily pulled the blanket aside slightly. Michael looked down. His expression changed instantly. First came confusion. Then something far deeper. So powerful that he actually took a step backward. That can't be. There was a note with her. Michael took the paper. He read it. The color drained from his face. Then he read it again. For several seconds, there was complete silence. Finally, he looked at the baby. Eva stared at him carefully. Then she smiled. It was only the smallest smile. Barely visible. But it was enough. At that exact moment, Michael understood that the life he had spent years believing was perfectly organized and predictable had just changed forever. For a long moment, he looked between the baby and the note. Emily had never seen anyone look so lost. He seemed unable to decide how he was supposed to react. "Come inside," he finally said. "It's cold." They entered a spacious living room. Eva rested calmly in Emily's arms and stared curiously at the lights on the ceiling. Michael sat down and read the note again. "Do you know the woman who wrote this?" Emily asked carefully. Michael nodded. "Yes. I think I know who she is." He took a deep breath. For several minutes, he said nothing before getting up and walking to the window. "Her name is Olivia Bennett. We were together for several years. And then you broke up." "Yes." "Did she ever tell you about a daughter?" "Never." Emily looked at Eva. "This baby clearly wasn't born a few days ago." "I can see that." Michael rubbed a hand over his face. For the first time since Emily had met him, he no longer looked like a rich, powerful man who had everything under control. He looked like an exhausted man who had suddenly been handed a problem the size of an entire lifetime. "Maybe we should call the police," Emily said. "We will. But first, we need to make sure the baby is okay." At that moment, Eva began to grow restless. Seconds later, she started crying. Emily tried rocking her, but it did not help. "She's probably hungry." Michael immediately hurried toward the kitchen. Emily followed him. There was milk in the refrigerator. Michael warmed some, then looked helplessly at Emily. "How is she supposed to drink it?" "I don't have baby bottles." They improvised as best they could to feed the baby temporarily, knowing they needed to buy proper infant formula as soon as possible. When Eva finally calmed down and fell asleep in Emily's arms, they returned to the living room. Michael was silent for a while. Then he sat across from her. "I suppose you deserve to know more about this. If the note is real, I should explain who Olivia is." Emily gently adjusted Eva's blanket. Michael watched the sleeping child. "I met her 5 years ago. My father was still alive, and I was only beginning to take on responsibilities in the company. Everything was much simpler then. Olivia worked as an event organizer. She was beautiful, confident, and had a natural talent for connecting with people. Around her, Michael felt relaxed and carefree. At first, they were happy. They traveled together, made plans, and even started talking about marriage." "What happened?" Emily asked quietly. "My father died unexpectedly. After that, Michael had to devote almost all his time to keeping the family company running. Olivia began feeling neglected. She pushed for marriage. More and more arguments turned into major fights. Michael asked her to be patient. He bought her expensive gifts. He tried to compensate with money for the time he could no longer give her. Nothing worked. Olivia began attending parties and events alone. Until one day, she posted a picture on social media showing herself in another man's arms. The man was not a stranger. He was one of Michael's closest friends. The relationship ended that same day. After that, Michael found it almost impossible to trust people. Suddenly, Eva woke and began to cry again. The next hour was a real test for both of them. Michael tried to calm her while constantly asking Emily what he should do. Emily was not an expert either. Eventually, she remembered that the baby might need a diaper change. After they managed to solve the problem and clean Eva up, she finally went back to sleep at around 3 in the morning. I think that was the longest hour of my life, Michael muttered. The rain outside was beginning to fade. The house grew silent. Eva slept peacefully. Emily and Michael remained in the living room. Then Michael unexpectedly asked, "Why didn't you call anyone when you lost your home?" Emily told him the truth. She had asked people for help. More than once. But over time, people grew tired of hearing about her problems. Some stopped answering. Others promised to help and never came back. Emily looked down at Eva. "We need to take her to a doctor. And we need to call the police." Michael hesitated. "Maybe we should try to find Olivia first. Talk to her. Convince her to come back for the baby. Don't be an idiot." Michael stared at her in surprise. Emily was surprised by her own sharpness too. A woman who leaves a 2-month-old baby in a box and disappears does not need the child handed straight back to her. She needs professional help. At 6 in the morning, Michael took out his phone and made a call. Half an hour later, a tall, energetic woman with short hair arrived. "Michael, what on earth happened?" "Dr. Parker, I need help." Dr. Linda Parker saw the baby. "Now I understand why you sounded like that on the phone." She carefully picked up Eva. Then she examined her. "She seems calm. At first glance, she appears healthy and well cared for." Michael raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure? I worked as a pediatrician for 30 years. Even so, she still needs a complete medical examination." By 10 in the morning, the property had already been visited by doctors, police officers, child protection representatives, and delivery drivers bringing everything from diapers to infant formula. The investigation took several hours. To Emily's surprise, the story was confirmed. Olivia Bennett really was Eva's mother. However, no father had been listed on the birth certificate. Child protection officials raised the possibility of temporarily placing Eva in foster care. Michael refused. He insisted that she remain with him while the tests and legal procedures were completed. When everyone finally left, the house fell silent again. Eva was sleeping in a brand new baby carrier. Michael watched her as though he still could not believe any of this was real. "You should get some sleep," Emily said quietly. Without realizing it, she had stopped speaking to him formally. Michael smiled faintly. "I don't think I'll ever sleep again." "You'll get used to it." Michael looked at her. "How can you be so sure?" "One of my old college roommates had a daughter. During the first few months, she also said she would never sleep again. Eventually, things got better." For the first time, Emily saw a genuine smile on Michael's face. Small, but sincere. That afternoon, Emily decided to leave. She returned to the guest house, folded the clothes she had borrowed, changed back into her own now dry clothes, and put everything in order. When she walked toward the entrance, Michael appeared carrying Eva. "You're leaving already?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "Yesterday, you told me to leave in the morning." "Yesterday, I didn't know I was a father." Emily could not help laughing. Michael remained silent for several seconds. He looked at Eva. Then at Emily. "I have a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "Stay here." Emily thought she had misheard him. "What?" "At least for a while." "Why?" Michael shrugged. "Because I know absolutely nothing about babies. Because you're the only person this little girl seems to recognize. And because sending you back onto the street feels wrong." Emily stood completely still. It was all too unexpected. I can't live at someone else's expense. Then work. Doing what? As my assistant. Emily stared at him. You already have assistants. Yes. But none of them would have the courage to tell me I'm acting like an idiot. I would. You already did last night. Emily smiled. At that moment, Eva made an unhappy sound from the carrier. Michael immediately tried to pick her up. He did it so awkwardly that Emily started laughing. A few seconds later, Michael began laughing too. The first weeks with Eva felt like participating in a test whose rules no one had been told. Michael quickly learned that money could not solve every problem. He could buy the best crib, hire the best doctors, pay for a nanny, fill an entire room with toys. But none of those things could explain why Eva cried at 3 in the morning or why, on certain nights, she refused to sleep unless Emily was holding her. The huge house, once silent and empty, slowly filled with new sounds. Toys appeared in the living room. Baby bottles stood on the kitchen table. A folded stroller waited near the entrance. And a small blanket somehow always ended up on Michael's favorite chair. At first, the mess irritated him. Then he stopped noticing it. A month later, he was buying baby rattles himself while insisting that he had chosen them solely for practical reasons. Adjusting to her new life was not easy for Emily either. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night convinced that someone would ask her to leave. On several occasions, she packed all her belongings into her old sports bag. The next morning, she unpacked them again, embarrassed by her own fear. Michael noticed. For a long time, he chose not to say anything. He was afraid of destroying the fragile trust beginning to grow between them. One morning, he found Emily in the kitchen with a tablet and an open notebook. Eva slept nearby. Emily was carefully copying notes about literary history from a digital textbook. Are you studying for an exam? Emily closed the notebook. I'm just trying to remember things I used to know. Why are you embarrassed about that? Because it's ridiculous. Going back to university costs money. I'd need time, books, clothes. I have none of that. Michael made coffee and sat across from her. How much would it cost to go back? Don't start. I only asked. I don't want to become another one of your responsibilities. Michael frowned slightly. You are not a responsibility. He said it more quietly than usual. That was exactly why Emily never forgot those words. Autumn ended. Then winter came. Michael officially hired Emily as his assistant. Eva grew quickly. Dr. Linda Parker began visiting regularly and supervising her health. During that time, Michael took a DNA test. The results confirmed that he really was Eva's father. Soon afterward, he began the legal process of establishing paternity. Meanwhile, authorities continued trying to locate Olivia. They failed. Some people claimed they had seen her first in Miami and later in Key West, but no one could confirm exactly where she was. In March, Michael drove Emily to the university. She remained seated inside the car for several minutes. In front of her was the life she had lost. Students carrying backpacks. Professors walking across campus. Familiar hallways. Schedules posted on notice boards. The smell of the old building where all her dreams had once begun. Michael did not pressure her. He only said, I'll wait here as long as you need. At the university administration office, Emily was initially treated rather coldly. But after speaking with the head of the department, she discovered that returning was technically possible. She would have to complete several missing courses and begin again with the next academic year. She would also have to pay tuition. The total amount, including the cost associated with returning to school, was significant. Emily came out of the office looking pale. But there was something in her eyes that Michael recognized immediately. Hope. Don't look at me like that, she said. Like what? I know exactly what you're about to offer. Then I won't need a long explanation. I'll pay you back. You can pay me back when you become a teacher and spend your days correcting essays with a red pen. Emily suddenly laughed. It was a slightly nervous laugh. But it was alive. Michael smiled too. Little by little, their lives began rebuilding themselves. Then, in April, a new problem appeared. Olivia returned. On her own. She looked exhausted, nervous, and emotionally unstable. The moment she arrived at the property, she demanded to see her daughter. When Michael refused to immediately hand Eva over, Olivia began screaming and crying. Her condition was clearly alarming. They called an ambulance. The doctors managed to calm her and took her to a clinic. 2 weeks later, once her condition had stabilized, Michael agreed to meet her. Olivia explained that she had discovered she was pregnant after their breakup. At first, she wanted to tell Michael. But her pride and fear that he would not believe the child was his stopped her. Then came financial problems. Debt. Trouble finding work. After Eva was born, Olivia fell into a severe depression. She began to feel as though her life was over. At her lowest moments, she blamed Michael. She also blamed the baby. In desperation, she made an impulsive decision. She left Eva on Michael's property, wrote the short note, and left Chicago that same night. For the next 6 months, she wandered through several coastal cities. She met new people. Spent more and more time in nightclubs and at parties. She developed problems with alcohol. Slowly, she felt herself falling into a hole she no longer knew how to escape. Eventually, she decided to return. Even she did not know what she was hoping to find. After several weeks of consultations with lawyers and child protection services, it was decided that Eva would remain living with her father. Olivia agreed to an official visitation arrangement and began serious treatment. That evening, Michael sat alone on the terrace for a long time. Emily brought him a cup of tea. She was about to leave when she heard his voice. Emily. She stopped. Stay here with me for a while. There was something in the way he said it that brought back the warm silence that had slowly become familiar between them. 3 months later, their lives were almost unrecognizable. Emily officially submitted the paperwork to return to university. Michael paid for her studies. Eva grew into a surprisingly calm little girl. One evening, while they sat on the terrace and Eva slept in her stroller nearby, Michael watched the sunset. Do you know something? What? That first night, I was completely certain that once morning came, I would never see you again. Emily smiled. I thought exactly the same thing. I'm glad we were both wrong. Michael gently took her hand. Emily did not pull away. And he did not want to let go. During the following weeks, Emily prepared intensely to return to class. She studied for several hours almost every day. Michael often found her reading notes late at night and complained that even intelligent people needed sleep. One evening, Dr. Parker found them arguing in the kitchen. Emily insisted on paying back at least part of the money for her education. Michael argued that sometimes a person had to learn how to accept help without immediately turning it into a debt. Linda listened for several minutes. Then she shook her head. You two argue like a married couple who have been together for 10 years. Emily and Michael immediately fell silent. They both blushed at the same time. Meanwhile, Eva continued growing. Whenever she saw Emily, she reached out her arms. And she laughed whenever Michael tried to maintain his usual serious expression. The little girl seemed to have a special talent for discovering the exact moments when adults were most vulnerable. Several times a month, Michael began taking a day off exclusively to spend with his daughter. To his employees, this was almost unbelievable. Before Eva, he could spend months practically leaving for work. Now he was willing to postpone an important meeting if Eva needed to see a doctor. He also accompanied her to supervised visits with Olivia, who continued rehabilitation. Olivia's health gradually improved. However, her relationship with her daughter remained complicated. Shortly before completing one stage of treatment, she told Michael that she would probably leave Chicago. She wanted to try starting her life again somewhere else. Emily watched all these changes. It became increasingly clear that the Michael she had met on that rainy night and the man standing before her now seemed like two entirely different people. With Eva, he was kinder, more patient, and unquestionably much happier. In August, Emily finally received official confirmation that she had been accepted back into university. When she received the documents, she stood outside the building for several minutes just staring at them. She could hardly believe it. A year earlier, such a possibility would have seemed impossible. That evening, they organized a small celebration. Dr. Parker brought a homemade pie. Michael bought a cake. Eva spent much of the evening trying to reach the colorful napkins on the table. During dinner, they laughed and remembered everything that had happened over the previous months. At some point, Emily realized something. That house was no longer simply the place where a stranger had allowed her to sleep for one night. It had become her home. Later that evening, Emily and Michael sat on the terrace talking about the future, university, and Eva. The conversation was calm and completely honest. That night, they both understood something neither was ready to say directly. They did not want to lose the people who, completely unexpectedly, had become their family. When classes began, it took Emily several weeks to feel confident again. Studying was harder than she expected. There were entire subjects she needed to catch up on. Some professors looked skeptically at her return after such a long absence. But Emily had no intention of giving up. Every morning she woke before everyone else. She studied for several hours and only then moved on to the rest of her responsibilities. Michael watched her discipline with genuine respect. He had known many people who gave up at the first sign of difficulty. Emily was different. Several times, he offered to hire private tutors or pay for extra courses. She accepted only what she believed was truly necessary. One evening, they were reviewing documents together in Michael's office. Eva was already asleep. Outside, a soft summer rain whispered against the windows. Michael closed a folder. You know, Emily. Just a year ago, I was certain I knew exactly what the rest of my life would look like. And what changed? Michael looked at her. Absolutely everything. Emily smiled. Very detailed answer. But completely honest. They sat in silence for a moment. Michael began talking about the years before. After his father died, he had practically lived for the company. He had managed to save the business. He had become successful. He had learned to rely only on himself. For a long time, he had believed that this was what it meant to be an adult. Now I understand something, he said. Coming home every night to an empty house can be much harder than solving any business problem. In the fall, Eva took her first independent steps. The event felt so important that Michael cancelled a business meeting. Dr. Parker arrived with a camera. Eva managed only a few steps from the couch to an armchair before sitting directly on the floor. The adults celebrated as though she had won an Olympic gold medal. Later, they looked through the photographs together. Everyone laughed at how incredibly serious Michael looked during the tiny family celebration. That was when Emily finally understood that happiness rarely arrives as one huge, dramatic event. Most of the time, it is built from hundreds of small moments that may seem insignificant to anyone watching from the outside. Not long ago, Emily had feared every new night because she did not know where she would sleep the next day. Now she had people she trusted. She had regained the path toward the career she had always dreamed of. And most importantly, she no longer felt alone. The changes had happened slowly, almost without her noticing. But those changes were exactly what allowed Emily to believe, for the first time, that the most painful chapters of her life were truly behind her. After a difficult week of classes, Emily spent almost an entire day at the university. When the lectures ended, she stayed in the library to prepare for an upcoming seminar. By the time she stepped outside, it was already dark. Michael was waiting for her in front of the building. Emily stopped in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I came to take you home. I do know how to use public transportation, you know. I've never doubted your abilities." Emily smiled and got into the car. During the drive, Michael asked about her professors, her classes, and her new classmates. At first, Emily answered briefly. Then she slowly began speaking with enthusiasm. She discovered that she liked telling someone about her university life when that person genuinely listened. When they reached home, Ava was still awake. The moment she saw Emily, she happily began waving her arms. Michael smiled. "Looks like someone missed you." "I think I missed her too." Emily picked Ava up. The little girl immediately hugged herself against her. From the kitchen, Dr. Linda Parker watched the scene. She slowly shook her head. "Every time I see all of you together, I think fate has very strange ways of bringing people into each other's lives." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Who exactly are you talking about?" Linda smiled. "All of you." That evening, they ate dinner together around the large table. The conversation was peaceful and warm. No one was in a hurry. No one needed to prove anything. And as Emily watched Michael trying to maintain a serious conversation while Eva played beside him, she understood something she had once believed was impossible. Sometimes a life can completely fall apart. A person can lose a home, an education, a job, even hope itself. They may come to believe there is no road left to follow. And yet, on the coldest night, beneath the heaviest rain, at the exact moment when everything seems to be over, an unexpected door can still open. Emily had entered Michael's life that night believing she only needed somewhere to survive until morning. Michael had allowed her to stay because he believed he was simply helping a stranger. Neither of them knew that beneath an armchair, hidden inside a small box, a baby girl named Ava was about to change all three of their lives forever. And perhaps that was why, years later, whenever Emily remembered that rainy night in Chicago, she no longer thought about the cold or the fear. She remembered a black SUV stopping beside the curb, a warmly lit house, a small cardboard box, the cry of a baby, and the unexpected beginning of the family none of them had known they were searching for.